Ever since I started growing my own bacterial cultures for a small research side project, I've run into the same annoying problem. The incubator looks perfect on the product page, clean lines, glossy photos, promises of exceptional temperature uniformity, but when you actually shove it onto a cramped lab bench, the reality can feel a lot less polished. I've watched people unbox their new shakers, stare at that flat rubber mat platform, and then spend the first hour wrestling with awkward clamp placements or trying to keep the temperature stable while the shaking orbit actually reaches the cultures. That frustration is why I'm doing this deep dive, so you can avoid a costly misstep before you click add to cart. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First, let's talk about the category itself. A shaking incubator isn't just a heater with a motor, it's a piece of equipment that needs to hold temperature steady while moving liquids in a smooth, reproducible orbit. In labs that run routine microbiology, cell culture, or enzyme production, the ability to keep dozens of flasks at the exact same temperature while they tumble can be the difference between a reliable result and a failed experiment. Because of that, users tend to prioritize three things: temperature uniformity across the chamber, a shaking motion that doesn't create bubbles or dead zones, and a platform that can accommodate a range of vessel sizes without a lot of custom rigging. The benchmark scientific Incu-Shaker H1010 hits the first 2 points on paper. The manufacturer advertises exceptional temperature uniformity, and the internal sensor grid really does keep the whole 18-inch chamber within a degree or two of the set point, even when the motor is running at full speed. In practice, that means you can place a tray of 2-liter flasks on the flat rubber mat and trust that each one sits at the same temperature, rather than having the back of the incubator lag a few degrees behind the front. I tested that by filling 4 flasks 21L and 22L with a simple broth, setting the incubator to 37°C, and running the shaker at 250 revolutions per minute. After 15 minutes, the temperature probes I stuck into each flask all read within 0.8°C of each other. That level of consistency is exactly what a microbiology workflow demands when you're trying to compare growth rates between strains. The shaking itself is defined by a circular 19 mm orbit, which is a bit unusual compared to the more common linear or elliptical motions you see on cheaper units. In real-world use, that small but consistent circle gives a gentle, uniform mixing that minimizes shear stress on delicate cells while still keeping the medium well aerated. For someone who's doing shake flask pre-cultures for protein expression, that orbit can reduce the amount of foaming you have to clean up later, because the motion isn't a jerky up and down thump. On the flip side, if you are accustomed to a very vigorous shake, for instance, when you want to maximize oxygen transfer in a high-density culture, this 19 mm circle might feel a touch mild. You can crank up the speed, but the motor tops out at 300 revolutions per minute, so there's a practical ceiling that some power users will find limiting. Now, the flat rubber mat platform is where the design either earns points or trips you up, depending on how you set up your workbench. The mat is generous, 18 inches gives you room for up to 5 2-liter flasks side by side, or you can stack smaller 1-liter vessels in a grid pattern. The mat itself is a soft silicone that grips the bottom of flasks, which means you don't need to worry about the flasks sliding around when the shaker starts. That's a big plus for anyone who has spent hours realigning flasks after each cycle. However, the mat does add a small amount of vertical height, about an inch, so the overall interior space is effectively reduced. If your lab racks are already low to the ceiling, you'll need to check the clearance before you commit. One of the more subtle strengths is the Magic Clamp accessory system. These are magnetic clamps that snap onto the rubber mat in a few seconds. In a busy lab where you constantly change flask sizes, being able to swap clamps without reaching for a screwdriver is a tangible time saver. I tried swapping from a 2-liter flask to a 500 milliliters microtube rack, and the whole process took under 30 seconds. That fluidity can be a real advantage if your protocol requires alternating between bulk culture and analytical samples throughout the day. The downside is that those clamps are an optional accessory. If you buy the base unit and don't pick up the magic set, you're left with the generic stainless steel clamps that aren't as quick to release. So unless you're willing to spend a little extra on the accessories, you may not capture the full convenience the system promises. The optional shelf that can hold Petri dishes or microplates feels like a thoughtful addition for someone who wants to run parallel solid media incubations while the flasks shake. In practice, the shelf slides in front of the mat with a simple latch, and you can keep